Hey guys, this is Ken Spangenberg here today with Millersville University head coach John Shehan. Coach, how you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on, Spange.
No problem. Thanks for making some time. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic today. We were just talking before we got going. It sounds like it's something we both have a lot of passion in. But before we get to youth baseball and some player development, let's talk about you for a second. No, it's not your favorite subject, but let's hear about your playing career, your coaching career, and all that.
Sure, you're going to hear a lot of Millersville. So I'll start off when I was 5. My dad got a job in dining at Millersville. I grew up on campus, went to a lot of camps there, not just for Coach Gallagher, the guy I played for, but Coach Abramitis going way back. So I have a home in Millersville. Like I said, 5 years old, kind of grew up there. My dad ended up working there for 32 years, and pretty cool when your dad gets to walk across campus, watch you play at Millersville, and then watch you coach at Millersville. So he just retired this year, so it is going to be a little bit weird next year when he's not just across campus. But that said, I played at Lampeter Strasburg High School. I'm not the best player to ever come out of Lampeter Strasburg. There's a lot of good players. Coach Garber and Coach Devlin produced some quality players there. And there's a couple more prospects coming through right now that I'm sure, if you check out PBR or, one of the rankings, Perfect Game, you're going to see some Lampeter Strasburg grads pop up there quite a bit. So proud of my heritage. For sure, the baseball in Eastern PA is really, really good, and iron sharpens iron. So, I've been a homegrown kid, and I left Millersville, signed a free agent contract as a senior, and played 2 years in the Brave system as a catcher, and decided to hang them up, which sounds a little weird, but just a lot of doors closing at one time. I hung them up and came back and got a graduate assistant at Millersville in the athletic department, was a part-time baseball coach as well, assistant. And at that point, the program was on probation. It's a long story there, but we were on probation from the guy that I played for. And the new head coach took 2 years of probation. We lost 37 games our second year together. And we weren't allowed to recruit. We didn't have a field on campus, and he resigned, and they handed me the head job as a 25-year-old, and I've been there ever since. So 13 years now, and Millersville is still my home, and it seems like 2 years there with the Braves, but other than that, I haven't really left at all.
That's unbelievable. I had no idea that your dad worked there for that long too. I know you played and obviously been there your entire coaching career. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there's a lot of guys that want to get back to their alma mater, and I'm just fortunate to have never left. And it's not that I haven't, thought about going elsewhere, but I mean, I just really think that God has a place for me right where I'm at, and the impact that we're able to have, as a coaching staff is it's no different here than it would be at a big time Division I. And my wife has a great job. She's a teacher, and our boys love coming to games. And there's definitely a family aspect at Division II that I think it's really hard to keep at Division I just because of the business side of it. But I love the relationship side of it at D2, and that's something that we're able to produce at Millersville, is just build a program that's all about family.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely true. The grass isn't always green on the other side. So it's awesome that you've found a place that you're going to be at long term. But I think you skipped over some details though. So from that 37 loss season to now, what's happened with Millersville baseball?
Well, I don't want to toot our own horn, but we've made 8 straight regionals. Right now, the Atlantic region, we I think we're the only team with a streak that's longer than 4, I believe. So we've been very consistent. We've been to a couple World Series. A couple years back, we broke our PSAC records for wins in a year with 53. So we got things going in the right direction, and there's just been so much that's going in the right way. We built a really nice ballpark. Our administration's been phenomenal. One of our former players, Miles Gallagher, is our AD. He graduated in 2010, and he was an essential part of the program as a player and a coach and getting things turned around. So he coached with us for 2 years. So we've got a lot of people in our corner. Our president has been phenomenal in terms of supporting athletics the past couple of years here too. So I mean, there's just a lot of things that are going right, and I can't take all the credit because it does take an army of people to build a good program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you talk about some of the best programs in the Mid-Atlantic, Millersville is definitely one that always comes up, whether you're talking about Division I, II, or III. I think you're also really well respected in the coaching ranks.
Thank you.
And that, no, no problem. It's earned, right? And I guess that kind of leads us to our topic today, coaching our kids and some youth player development. So I'm a new dad. You obviously, we have a couple.
Yeah, we have a 9-year-old boy, Benny, and an 11-year-old Cole. So
Awesome.
they both love the game. Multi-sport kids. Well, I know we're going to talk about that today, but they both are in love with baseball, and that's the best thing as a baseball dad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to talk about this a little bit more towards the end, but I think that, cultivating that love as a baseball coach, it's got to be hard to not push them too much. So what recommendations do you have for parents out there who, see that their sons love the game, want to help them get better, but also don't want to drive them away from the sport by pushing a little too hard?
That's a really tough question. That might be the hardest question for college coaches. Kids want to play baseball or love playing the game because our guys right now, I think even worse in quarantine. I mean, we're in our basement. We're going out to the field. It gets monotonous because I think part of it's me trying to get my fix in and being around the game. But it's really tough. You have to listen to the kid. I think the kids are going to tell you when they want to work out, when they want to practice, and even when they want to watch a ball game on TV. And all too often we shove it down their throats. And I'm just as guilty as any other parent. There are days where I don't know how to motivate. And again, I think the important thing is doing it when they want to do it. Some kids are going to be a lot more motivated than others, and some kids are going to have the discipline to just know that they're going to put the work in and have that drive, or they want to compete with a certain kid in their little league program. And other kids want to be put in a game situation every day, and you got to make it fun and competitive for them. So there's ways to do it, but I really think that the number one key is just listening to them and allowing them to make the decisions on when they practice, and which is really tough because we know that the more they practice, the better they're going to be and the more they're going to really enjoy the game. But, at younger ages, it's really hard to do that. And we had a professor at Millersville. We have a professor at Millersville, Dr. Richard Glenn, and he's done a fantastic job in helping his boys love the game of baseball. And they're so motivated to just go to the field and hit. And I've been watching those guys grow up, and they used to come to our youth camps. Now one's a freshman at Penn State, doesn't play baseball. But you talk about a family that loves the game, and I think one of the keys is baseball history for them. They've just jumped into the baseball history, the legends, Willie Mays and Ernie Banks and Babe Ruth, and they could tell you a lot of history there. And I think that's been great for our 11-year-old as well, is just to try to explain the history of the game and go back and watch some old videos. YouTube is fantastic for that. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that honestly I really hadn't thought too much of. I mean, you say Babe Ruth, and most of these kids are not going to hear it. And you say Ernie Banks, I'm sure none of these kids know who that is. So YouTube would be a great one. So while you mentioned practice a few times, while we're on that, what does a normal practice look like for the Shehan family?
We have gotten into motor patterning, and I know it sounds a little more complicated than what most parents are going to hear, but I've tried to really dig into motor skills for kids, and it started out a couple years ago where we doing research that younger kids, their motor patterning is going to be very inconsistent, and the best thing to teach is intent. So I've noticed that our 9-year-old even now can't repeat his swing 4 days in a row. He might take 3 days and everything's really good and consistent, and that fourth day it's terrible. And again, I'm not a scientist, or I don't have a PhD in motor skills, but it's pretty obvious when you work with your kids enough that they're just not going to be able to hold on to the mechanics like an 18 to 22-year-old would in college. So we, first of all, our number one rule in our house is swing as hard as you can. Just come out of your shoes and have intent with every swing. Whether you hit it or not, it's get the most out of your body and swing hard. But we have, with our 11-year-old especially, started on cleaning up some movements, and he's a little bit better than the 9-year-old, but it might be 5 days out of 7 or 6 days out of 7 that he moves really well, and then the 7th day he struggles. So. Right. I think just having that idea in the back of your mind that they are going to struggle, that it's okay, and then coaching them through that struggle, and that, hey, you're going to have bad days. It's a great way to teach the mental game as well. But teaching them to move from the middle of their body has been a big piece of the pie. And then once they get a movement down and we can repeat it for, 4 or 5 days, then we'll try to challenge it and push them and create some failure. And then usually it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So but that's kind of the general philosophy there. We do a lot of band work. We do a lot of med ball work. We brought some water bags home from the office, so we've been doing a lot of water bag work, which they love. It's a little bit of a challenge. We've had them catch water bags on balance beams now, and catch water bags with eyes closed, and learning how to brace and use their core. So it's not just go down in the basement and hit 100 balls. So
that's awesome, and there's a lot to unpack there. So when you talk about like the intent, is Greg Rose a guy you really like? Because I've heard him say a lot that especially at the younger ages, it's the prime time to build just explosiveness.
Yeah, I mean, and not just him, but we have one of the boys plays with the Lancaster Country Club Pro, and what he's talked to us about, we actually have 5 or 6 kids that train together every fall, and we got away from the fall ball. Most of the other kids play other sports in the fall too. Our kids play flag football, and a couple of kids play soccer. So we decided we were going to get 5 or 6 kids together, 2 or 3 nights a week, and just train baseball skills instead of playing on the weekends, because most of the kids were playing other sports. And Rick brought his kid out, and Rick's the pro there at the country club, and he says that if you can get a kid that's between 9 and 12 to swing as hard as he can and learn how to use his body, by the time they're 18 to 22, it's going to be like rocket fuel. But if you wait till after 12, between 12 and 15, you're probably looking more like gasoline. And if it's 15 or over, and they finally figure it out at that point, that it's going to be more like diesel fuel. So I think there's a legitimate thing to that, where even sprinting, I mean, a lot of ability happens at that younger age group, and they figure out their bodies and they figure out how to move fast, and it's a huge key to development. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think I'm guilty of being a crazy parent in that I started researching that like the second I had my daughter.
Yeah.
I completely agree. It's crazy the amount of information out there. Yet you see so many kids get taught so much mechanics at a really young age. Because obviously your background's a little different than like the normal parent. For a regular parent who's out working with their kids, or want to get them lessons, what age would you recommend that start?
Lessons is a loaded question, because it depends who you're working with. I think, again, it depends what you're focused on as well. Teaching proper patterning, I think probably 10 to 12 is probably a good place to start. Before that, you're probably going to struggle to have them focus at all. And even our 9-year-old, like he's really, really hard, in terms of focus. I mean, you probably have 20 minutes and then you're done. So, but between 10 and 12, and you should know as a parent, knowing your kid, is he one that's able to really focus in school or not? How much does he love the game? Because if he loves the game and he's really coachable from that aspect, you might want to start him more on the side of 10 years old. But that's my recommendation. I don't have a perfect answer for that question, but I would recommend finding somebody who does understand development, and not just data-driven development, but teaching. I mean, we have a youth coach in the area, Jeremy Hess. He played at Shippensburg, and he's phenomenal. He has an LEd degree. He's well-researched, and he's learning the game just like all of us. But it doesn't always have to be the guy that played in the big leagues or played Double-A that's going to be the best person to teach the game to your kids either. I mean, I would look for somebody that's well-researched first and has a strong philosophy in building movements and athleticism, more so than just mechanical skills that you see on TV. I mean, it's really easy to train just mechanics and, like you said, not get anywhere and make the kid any better. The goal is to be good when they're 16 or 18. That's the hope. So.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that we're going to talk about more a little later on. There's one more thing kind of in this vein I want to talk about. So I completely agree with the intent-based training. I think one struggle is taking that into a game. So you might be coaching your kid to swing as hard as you can. He goes out, plays a game, swings as hard as he can, goes 0 for 4 with 3 Ks. Tough to develop love of the game when you're not having on-field success. How do you balance the training and what you know is best for them with giving them some tools to help them succeed in the present?
Sure. I mean, the mental game is such a huge part of what we do anyway from a coaching aspect, and we get really hung up on the mechanical side of it and biomechanics and motor patterning and blah, 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 blah. But I think it's a great opportunity to teach those kids that, yeah, there are going to be days where you strike out 3 times. There's a lot of kids that have so much success early in their careers, and then they struggle when they first see failure. And we get them in college all the time. I mean, kids don't know how to come out of a slump because they've never done it before. So I think there is some value in failing. It also motivates certain kids. It motivates from a love of the game aspect. I mean, it's all how you communicate it too. I mean, as a parent, you really need to focus less on the outcome of each at bat and more on what you're trying to teach. So if you're going to focus on intent, and your question for success for that at bat is, did you get your swing off hard 3 times? Did you swing at strikes? Did you come out of your shoes and try to hit the ball a mile? You know, I know we weren't going to talk about my dad, but a couple summers ago, he was at a game, and our Cole, I think he was 9 at that point. He struck out 3 times in a game, just like you said. My dad said, you know, he's got to widen out. He's got to get rid of that knee lift. He's over swinging. He doesn't know where the strike zone is. His head's moving this much, and I looked at him and said, he'll be fine. And the next game he hit a home run, and everything was fine again. So, you know, it's just a matter of being patient with them, and their motor skills are going to catch up when they're 14 or 15, and things are going to take off. At least that's the plan in our family. We're really hoping that happens.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan. And, you know, even though that you don't necessarily get like certified, I think your resume kind of speaks for itself that you've seen a lot go wrong, go right. And you're trying to provide the best path for your kids.
It's really tough, Ken. It's really, really hard because you're still a dad. I mean, you still want to see your kid be successful. You hate to see him cry on the bench when he strikes out, and you hate to see him fail, but deep down inside, it's part of the game.
Yeah, you just gotta be patient and know that you're doing the best things right now, and they'll pay off down the road. So let's go back to this bad game. So your kid has a real bad game. You guys are walking back to the car together. You got an hour drive. You know, what does that look like?
There's probably going to be a point where Dad stopped lecturing me. I mean, honestly, I love to talk the game. I love to break it down. Again, you got to listen to your kid though. When he's ready to talk about it, he'll talk about it. And I think both kids are different. Our 11-year-old is analytical. He wants to know what he did poorly. He wants to know what he did well. He's probably going to tell you what he did well a couple times before he's going to get into telling you what he did poorly. So more questioning, I think, than telling, and not from an interrogation standpoint either. But I think the more you ask questions as a parent, rather than informing them on what they did well or did poorly at, is a great way for them to learn and assess themselves and develop that. And I think as a college coach, one of the things that we try to figure out in the recruiting process is self-assessment. Can that athlete self-assess? And it's a hard thing to do, but the guys that have been able to say, yeah, I was terrible today and I need to work on this, and this, are the ones that seem to have humility and work and get better. It's also important to know when you're doing well with something and that you need to back off and let things happen. So a lot of our best players have been good self-assessors. So that's something that I'd like our boys to learn through the game. And that's just a life skill that can help them anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people kind of fall into 2 buckets, right? One where they just focus on what they did right, and 2, they just focus on what they did wrong. There's a lot of information out there. Is there anything that you use specifically for this? Like, do you expose the kids to, Ken Revisa or anything like that? Or is it more just you talking?
I don't know that we've ever jumped in and I've put a name to it, but yeah, we've used heads up baseball stuff going way back. I had the original book, I think back in 2000, I want to say 90, 98, 99, 2000. I read it in high school. So yeah, Ken was a big influence on me in our career. And the new book that came out with Hansen and Revisa was pretty good. I think the one thing that I have taken from that book, and not necessarily told our kids, but they struggle with competition, and it goes back to all the lessons, and it goes back to all the the tournament baseball that's being played. And yes, they're competitive environments, but kids compete less because they're playing less wiffle ball. They're playing less pickup basketball in the driveway. So, teaching those kids to compete and setting a process in place for competition is something that we've really tried to put together in our household. Whether it's ping pong or, adding some kind of game into every round we hit, or, lately they've been doing pull downs and trying to outdo each other with velocity. And the kid up the street's doing them too. Coach Hess, we were just talking about his son's been doing a lot of throwing work too. So just teaching that intent, but making it really, really competitive and tracking it has been a good thing for our guys.
So I keep hearing the word compete. I don't hear the word win, and I'm guessing that's probably intentional. Am I right?
No doubt about it. I mean, we all love to win, and it's sometimes in our house it's more about teaching these kids how to lose. Our 9-year-old hates to lose, but I think that's one of the reasons why the younger kids are going to pan out. Sometimes, well, in our house when I grew up, my younger brother ended up being a lot better than me. I beat him up every once in a while, and I probably beat him in wiffle ball, a million times, beat him in pickup basketball, and beat him in ping pong. And those kids end up hating losing, and that's where our 9-year-old is right now. But, it's not so much, like you said, loving to win as it is, learning how to compete and not giving up. And, it's a lot of fun. The oldest, and I was the oldest kid in the family, I think I missed that a little bit, just because I did win all the time when I was a kid. So, but yeah, there's a lot of intentionality in that. I mean, I think that winning is something that obviously you earn, and losing is not necessarily a bad thing. It's one of those things that if we didn't lose 37 games in 2007, I guarantee I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I learned more from losing that year than anything else. But the guys that turned our program around were those that competed. And we're going to win every game. So baseball is such a great sport from a life aspect. And I know it gets beat to a pulp and it sounds so cliche, but it's so true. I mean, it teaches you how to fail. It teaches you how to compete. You're not going to win every day. You work on the process, you focus on the process, and you'll be more successful than you are, unsuccessful, but you're still going to have bad days. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the old guys like us know that it's finding ways to get it into players' heads before they're not players anymore, I guess. That's always, that's the tough part, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
So we talked a little bit about winning. Let's talk a little bit more. What are your thoughts on, trophies at young ages, really competitive tournaments, national travel? Do you think that's a priority? Do you think that's not a priority? Do you not really care one way or the other?
Loaded question, tough one to answer, just because I think it's different for every kid. And I'll tell you that our son Cole just started travel ball this year. He didn't get to play in any games because they didn't get out there yet. But he was really excited about it, and I think that's the key. He has to be excited. Your son has to be excited about playing. It's a huge investment, whether you're playing, on a local travel team or you're playing on a national travel team that's going all over the place. The kid has to want to do it, because if it's a parent-driven thing, they're going to burn out. There's just way too many games being played, way too many weekends being played. So my wife and I intentionally wanted to wait until he wanted to do it. He was a little bit intimidated this year too, which I found to be really interesting, because the first practice, I want to do it. And he showed up and he was really nervous. And then he saw, one of his other friends that played locally with him. And then he hit a couple balls and he looked around and it was like, okay, I do belong here. And the confidence started to go up. So, part of it, I think they have to want to do it, but you also have to, put them in a situation where they're going to be confident in themselves as well. Travel ball, I think there's a point where you can overdo it. And I think there's a point where there's too many practices. And I think there's a point where there's going to be too much travel. Kids are going to get burned out. They want to be able to go to the pool in the summer, and they want to be able to do their thing and be a kid. And I think we're in danger as a society of overdoing it. But at the same time, from a development aspect, it's really hard to argue when, our 9-year-old, we've been really blessed with a coach and Jeremy Hess there that's that's data driven, that's development driven, that focuses on the right things. With our older kid, it's not that those guys don't love the game and want to teach the game, but it's just from a development aspect, you really have to gauge, okay, is he having fun? Is he getting better? And if you have youth coaches in your in your local league that can help your sons get better and really develop skills for life, then keep them there. But if you can't find that, then I think it's wise, especially if your kid loves the game, to find something that fits him and his passion, and that's going to help him get better. So I know it's a little bit gray, but I mean, we have one kid that plays travel ball and one kid that may never play travel ball. And it just depends on each individual. We're kind of seeing it from both sides in our family.
Yeah, I mean, it's gray, but I think it needs to be gray. It's a crazy sport. They're at a really young age, so there's so many variables that go into it. Really, like you said, it's just weighing and trying to make the best decision for that individual kid.
Sure. We're already seeing kids with elbow injuries at the age of 10 or 11.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me that kids are throwing that much. And there's a lot of research out there. Again, I'm not a doctor, but our goal is to teach our kids intent, but also to teach them how to take care of their arms as well. And I think there's a point where these kids are throwing 100 innings in a year, and it's just way too much for a young athlete. So, there has to be a line there from a volume aspect as well. And I think it's really wise that a parent, if their kid's going to pitch at this age, or play 50-game seasons, you need to be wise and talk to some experts about what's that, what are the side effects to playing that much.
Yeah, I mean, we have upwards of 40 pro guys that train with us in the off season, and we had, when I say a bunch, I mean a bunch of players that came in to work with us who threw more innings than the professional players. Huh. And some of these kids were 10, 11 years old, so that's right. A real thing. So why don't let's stop there and talk about playing versus training. Now, personally, I've seen that, especially at the young ages, they just want to play games, and that is it. Like, they're playing on 3 teams every single day is a game with a different team. What are your recommendations, I guess, as far as like what that ratio should look like, and how does that change as they get older?
Great question. Kids want to play the game, they should play the game. I mean, it is, at the end of the day, it's a game that needs to be played, and the training can get really old. And I think we've met that with Cole and Ben right now. But we've been, I think this is day 63 for us that we haven't had baseball since our season got canceled. So I bet we've taken 6 to 8 days off where we haven't done anything baseball wise or anything athletic. Whether, we're doing some movement patterning with lifting. And I know that sounds crazy with the 9 to 11-year-old, but it's researched. But there's probably been 6 or 8 days that we haven't done anything. And I think we're kind of at the point right now where we need to play. The kids need to go play a pickup game. They need to go to the field. They need to, even if it's home run derby, they need to go out and just enjoy themselves, because they're getting to that point where they're burned out. But there needs to be a point where with every athlete, I think that training is part of getting better, whether you're 9, 10, 11 years old. I think I said this earlier, we get, 5 or 6 kids over to the field a couple nights a week and just solely work on development. And, it's kind of fun to take Rapsodo over, get some bat sensors out, and really start doing some data-driven stuff with 9-year-olds, and they love that stuff. I mean, you can play home run derby on a Rapsodo and teach intent and, create a point game with them. And there was a lot of value in that. But again, they're still working on development in a fun environment. As far as a ratio goes, that's a great question. I mean, you got to take breaks. There's no there's no point in playing. I think playing 8 months out of the year is a lot. And we had some pressure last year. You need to play fall ball. You need to play fall ball. And I'm thinking, having those guys in a controlled environment where we can actually focus on getting better rather than being in compete mode was actually a great thing for them. And it has been so far in quarantine as well. I mean, we've gotten a lot accomplished. And the weightlifting side of things, we never really had a chance to, because they play, and I know we're going to talk about this, but they play three sports other than baseball. So there really wasn't a chance for them to actually learn movements. We're not throwing heavy weight on, but we're learning how to hinge. We're learning how to squat. We're learning how to pull and press. And those are great things for a 9 to 11-year-old, but you can't do that when you're playing four sports. It's really hard to do that. So a great ratio in my mind. I think if you play, that sounds crazy, 5 or 6 months of the year and you're either playing another sport or training for the other 5 or 6 months, it's probably pretty healthy.
Yeah, and USA Baseball actually has a really cool report. I think it came out in like 2016 about different ratios, and it's actually crazy. Their ratio of playing to training, it's backwards from what most people do. I mean, especially at the young ages, it might be like 80% training and like 20% games as like an 8 to 10-year-old.
Yeah.
If you think about it, like think about what you actually do in a baseball game. Like how many times do you sprint? How many times do you swing? How many times do you throw, catch? It's not a lot. You can see why doctors don't even consider baseball a sport. Is because there's not a lot of physical activity. So you could spend 4 hours at the park and really not get much done. And I think that's the trap we can fall into by just playing mindset. You're not actually improving skills.
Right. It's exactly why we decided to not play fall ball. I mean, it wasn't necessarily because they were playing so much flag football that they didn't have time to play fall ball. It was just the fact that, okay, we can get 4 bats in a doubleheader because there's 22 kids playing, on a Sunday afternoon, or we can, and go to practice and get your 8 swings or 10 swings in BP, and stand around and shag, or we can legitimately train 2 to 3 days a week and get, 400 swings and be data driven and really control the environment, and do some sprint work and do some plyometric work. And, I think those are the things that, no offense to youth coaches, but you're not seeing that with the normal dad coaches. And for having 5 or 6 kids that are into it, it's been really, really positive. It's hard to do that with a group of 12 or 13 as well. It can be done.
Yeah, baseball is just such a tough sport to get like that amount of reps in with 12 guys, and you're with yourself or another coach. It's tough,
right?
Especially when they're not necessarily old enough to be self-sufficient and go like run a T station with them and another guy.
Sure.
You mentioned it. What'd you say?
Try doing the Jagger Band program with a 9-year-old. It's a challenge.
Did you get snapped yet? I feel like it ended up being a weapon pretty quickly.
I don't think I've been snapped, but I think our 9-year-old snapped our 11-year-old just the other day.
That makes sense.
They tend to fight in the basement when I'm not down there. So.
Well, I just saw. Do you follow Jeremy Frischall?
I don't.
Big in the. Oh, you got to check him out. So he's big in the LTAD.
Okay.
Youth long-term development. It's really interesting. Yeah. But he's a big advocate of like wrestling and like pushing, things like that, just to teach guys body awareness.
Interesting.
But very cool training stuff for youth people. Very cool. It's like obstacle courses and things like that.
Huh.
It's awesome.
Our kids would love that. Our 9-year-old wrestles, and it has been a very, very good thing for him, for sure. So confidence building too. I mean, it's a tremendous sport from, being on a mat in front of a couple hundred people, and it's mano a mano. I mean, dad's not coming out to help you in that situation. So it's been a really positive thing for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an awesome sport. I wrestled through high school up in northeastern PA, which is like all we do up there.
Yeah.
And it's like none other. Like you got to be a little messed up in the head to do it in college. But for youth guys especially, I think there's so much value to it.
Oh yeah.
You're talking about like dealing with losing, competing, just the discipline of being on weight. There's so much benefit to that. But I guess that kind of leads us into the big topic that I want to talk about. So playing multiple sports, what are your thoughts?
Yes, and to a certain aspect, I think it and we probably share this opinion, but at the end of the day, when it starts to be a detriment to the sport that you're most focused on and you're the most passionate for, and you may have a chance to play beyond high school, or for some, you may not have a chance to play in high school if you don't move on from one sport or another. So I think there is a line, but I think for the younger guys, they need to play as many sports as they can. Try sports, first of all. I mean, it's hard to figure out what you're going to be passionate about if if you're not trying other things. So we have one that wrestles and one that plays basketball, and both kids swim in the summer. We had one play soccer early, and now they're both playing flag football. I don't know if they'll move into tackle football or not, but I think it's really, really important that they get a chance to play a lot of different sports. My dad was a wrestler. He wrestled at Shippensburg, and I don't condone going. No, I'm just joking.
I was going to say, not Millersville? What's going on?
No, but he wrestled at Shippensburg, and I think a lot of that discipline was instilled in my brother and I. And my brother played professional baseball as well. He went to Georgia Southern University. But, at the end of the day, it was never about what sport we chose to play with. From my dad's aspect, I think he did a really, really good job of allowing us to figure out what we really enjoyed and then pushing us to work our hardest at that sport. So I was a single sport athlete. I played baseball only from the time I was, I want to say 11. And my brother played football, basketball, and baseball, and he was a lot more athletic. So he could have gotten away with that. I think if I tried to play too many sports, I wouldn't have had the time to work as hard as I needed to with my personal athleticism. But like I said, for him, I mean, it was easy for him to play basketball and then come back out for baseball as a freshman and then, go back and be the quarterback on the freshman team. So it's one of those things where his athleticism allowed him to play more sports longer than it did for me. And it worked out for both of us, but we both took different tracks. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in there. I think just skill assessment and picking up different skills. Like if you just play one sport, you're missing the boat on just acquiring so many different talents that you never would.
Sure.
Like imagine if you just played baseball, like you said, there's probably things that you were really bad at. Like I imagine you probably couldn't kick a soccer ball too well.
No.
You don't kick anything in baseball. Well, now that's probably a good thing now. I'd make fun if you were playing soccer in the backyard. But as a young kid, you played a bunch of different sports and you're exposed to a bunch of different movements and patterns and challenges, and your body picks up those things. As a head college coach, I enjoyed recruiting 2 sports or 3 sport athletes. I'm sure you do too,
Absolutely.
because once you get them and you focus just on baseball, guess what happens? They get a lot better.
No doubt. And
on the flip side, go ahead.
I mean, just to piggyback on that, not to cut you off, but if you look at some of those multi-sport athletes in high school, they're either coming from small schools, or we had a kid named Tyler Orris who came from Cedar Cliff a couple years ago. He was a great quarterback. I mean, he was a phenomenal athlete. So, is it the multi-sport athleticism that develops that athleticism, or is it that the kid is just really athletic and he can play multiple sports? So I don't know. It's a great question, but there are definite advantages to recruiting multi-sport kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a chicken or the egg.
Right.
And from what I've seen is as you get older, if you're not elite in both, you end up being average at both. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of average players out there. And if someone's not good enough to play at Millersville, but they play 3 sports, I don't think that's going to be someone you're going to recruit. Right?
Correct.
You're going to look for the best possible player.
He's still got to be a good baseball player. Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of the misperception out there. And you hear coaches say, oh, I love multi-sport athletes. But for them to love you, you have to be good enough to play there.
No doubt.
And that's the challenge.
I have seen particular sports and particular positions in those sports do really well. So, I mean, your point guards from a basketball team, they generally compete well. They lead well. They communicate well, which is part of that leadership. They also have poise. I mean, it's in baseball, we generally don't have to, command a pitch. You might have to command a pitch in the 9th inning with 2 outs and 2 strikes and winning on a 3rd. But generally, there isn't a student section screaming at you when you're trying to do it. There's probably 5 moms and dads there. It's 30 degrees in March, and that's about it. But that point guard who has to knock down a free throw with the clock ticking down and the student section screaming at him, it's a totally different atmosphere. I think Friday night football is the same thing. The quarterbacks on high school football teams that do well generally have poise under pressure. They generally have communication ability and leadership abilities, skills that are really hard to teach on the baseball field. I mean, you're going to find it in some shortstops. You're going to find it in some catchers, but I do think those skills are a little bit easy to develop on the football and basketball courts and fields.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We were talking about this before we got on, but baseball is just such a weird sport. There's not a lot of transfer from, soccer to baseball or football to baseball, but those leadership, those intangibles really do. And sometimes it's easy to pick those up in different sports for sure.
Right.
Now, when we talk about multiple sports, I think we're talking about like travel sports or varsity sports. What are your thoughts of guys playing like pickup basketball, things like that? Would you encourage that?
Absolutely. I love it. I think if you're going to play a varsity sport, let's say you're going to play basketball and baseball, if your sport is baseball and you're going to play college baseball and basketball becomes a detriment to your baseball career, it's time to give it up. But if you can play pickup basketball on the weekend and get your basketball fix in, and it's not going to affect your training, and we're talking probably more high school level athletes at this point, but if it's not going to affect your training, and it's not going to be a detriment to your baseball in the spring, then go ahead and play. Absolutely, go ahead and play. So, but I think it's just that point where when is that other sport getting in the way of what you're going to do for the long term? That's
Yeah,
what
yeah, I think you're absolutely dead on. So the last thing I just want to circle back to, you talked about being the best 16 to 18-year-old. And I don't think that's something a lot of people think about. They think about who's the best right this second. You want to talk about a couple of things or a couple of reasons why that's not necessarily the most important thing in the world? Like why being the best 12-year-old isn't necessarily end all be all?
My dad instilled in me that, and we never brought it to light who it was that year. I was not the best player when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way up till I was a senior in high school. I don't think I was the best player in the team until I was a senior in college, honestly. I think there's always somebody better than me in every program and every team I played on, which was a great thing. But my dad and I would talk about, hey, let's try to be better than this kid by the end of the year. Let's work a little bit harder and see if you can pass this kid and make it black and white. Make it, if somebody asks who's better, you or him at the end of the year, some random person watching you two play would know that you're a better player. Again, it was never a cocky thing. It was never something that we went out and talked about, but it was just instilling that competitive drive in me to find a way to get a little bit better than the next guy. And I think that's something that done in the right way could really help kids. But being good when you're 12, it rarely, it rarely turns around. There's some phenomenal 12-year-old players that just aren't very good baseball players when they're 17 or 18 years old. And a lot of it is just early development. I forget what book it was, but it might have been Outliers, where it just talks about how birth dates affect, kids that are older, that are almost a year older, but still meet the birth date line, tend to be a lot better when they're younger. And that's something that eventually I think it catches up to you when you're 16 to 18 and you're done growing. And that's when things start to kind of even out. So, yeah, I think you have to train with the long term in mind and help your kids understand that failure is okay and that they don't have to be the best player at that point. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be the best player, but being the best player is sometimes a curse. And that's going back to the travel question earlier. You do want to put your kid, I would recommend putting your kid on a team, at least one team. If they're most kids play for more than one team, even at the age of 10 to 12 now. But if they could play for one team where they were not the best player, it's probably going to be a help to them from a career aspect. At the same time, our 8-year-old was a really good 8-year-old player, and he was one of the older kids in 8U, and he had a really, really good summer at 8U and loved every minute of it because he saw so much success. So I think there is a balance there that they have to see some success to enjoy playing the game. If they stink, and you keep playing them at a higher and higher level, they're just going to grow frustrated too. So,
yeah, it's such a tough balance between pushing them, embracing failure, and then letting them enjoy it a little bit.
Right.
You can talk about like the mental side of the game all you want, but if you just went 0 for 20, Dad, shut up.
Yes.
I just want to get a hit. I want to get a batting average. But yeah, that was awesome. That's really all I have, John. Do you have any advice for anybody listening?
Oh man. It's just a learning curve for everybody. I struggle with it. My wife is a really good balance for me, and she coached cheerleading. I don't even think that's a sport. She knows I don't think that. I don't get cheerleading, but to each her own. She's just been really, really good about keeping things in perspective for me. The Matheny Manifesto, again, it's almost become cliche talking about this book, but I think they did a really, really good job. Mike Matheny wrote it, and he did a fantastic job trying to put things in perspective and allowing the kids to just step back and have fun. And I think that at the end of the day, I mean, that's what we need to do. Create that environment where they enjoy the game and love the game for what it is. And they'll tell you when they're ready to train, and they'll tell you when they're ready to get a lot more serious about it. But we need more kids to love the game of baseball, and it's something that I think we're hurting the game by getting so serious at such an early age with it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's definitely a must read for anyone that hasn't read it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But appreciate your time today.
Oh, thanks a lot, Ken. Thanks for having me on. Love the topic.
No problem. Yeah, it's a good one.